Hi, welcome back to Smart Property Systems training. In the last video we covered adding a property to get started using Smart Property Systems. In this video we're going to cover adding a lease to that property. A lease within Smart Property Systems is a software control. It's how you configure the system to track that particular property. If you understand the concept that it's just a software control and not a legal binding agreement, it will make it easier to understand how to work with this particular lease if it's renewing in the future or if it needs to end early or so forth. Again, a lease is just a software control. Alright, there's a couple different ways you can add a lease to Smart Property Systems. You can do it from your dashboard by clicking the Add Lease button. You can go to the Properties menu and My Leases, or you can just go to My Properties. There's a couple different advantages to going to My Properties. My Properties is going to show you all the properties that you have defined, along with what units are vacant and what units have current leases. So in this particular case, we're going to add a lease to Unit 2 of Forest Glen. You'll notice here we could also create a web flyer, which in a logical sense, if the unit is vacant, you might want to advertise it first, but we're going to cover that in a different video. So for now, we're going to select Add Lease on Unit 2 of the Forest Glen property. The advantage of doing that, the Add Lease wizard that comes up will now be pre-populated with the property and unit that you selected. If you go to Add New Lease by any other means, you will have to select the property that you're going to add a lease to and then the unit. You can also, from this wizard, select a property or create a new property. So, in this case, we selected here, so it's pre-populated. The next step is to specify how often the rent is due, meaning once a month or in one lump sum payment. Currently, there is no way to specify a weekly rent payment is expected. So, either once a month or one lump payment. Next, you're going to specify the duration. Say this is a 6-month or 12-month lease. It's going to be a fixed term. You can also select month to month. But for this video, let's go ahead and select fixed term. Now, if you want, you can then specify that the lease will become month to month at the end of a lease. You can change this at any time. If 6 months in you decide to go month to month at the end of the term, you can specify this at that point. Okay, next you're going to specify the start date and the end date. By default, it should default to the next month and then 12 months after that, which is the end term. Now, occasions when this won't happen, if you already have an existing lease on this particular unit and you've got new tenants moving in next month, so you want to get that started, get the ball started. It's going to default to whatever the end of the existing lease is. So if the existing lease ended on May 30th, then this would actually be June 1st. It would default to the next month after the end term of the existing lease. You cannot have overlapping leases for a unit within Smart Property Systems. Alright, so for cases of this video, let's say we're going to start the lease on the middle of the month. The tenant's not moving into the 15th. What's important about this is you now have to decide, is the rent going to be due on the 1st of the month, meaning they're moving in 2 weeks early, but I still want to collect the rent on June 1st or so forth, or do you want to collect it on the 15th, the day they move in? The only way to specify a different date other than the 1st is to start the lease on that day. So if you wanted rent collected on the 7th of the month, you will have to start the lease on May 7th. So for this scenario, let's just go ahead and say I want to collect it on the 1st of the month. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to put what the rent is. Now, one of the things the system is going to do is it's going to say you selected a due date which does not coincide with the start-end dates. In other words, I'm specifying the 1st of the month, but the tenant's moving in on the 15th. The system is going to say fill in the prorated amount. So what's going to be due for the 15th to the 31st? It will automatically take what you have entered in as the rent, and specify what the rent would be for the number of days that the tenant's moving in early. If you want that to be any other amount, you want to change it here. It will also do the same thing if you specify the end date to be off. Like say they're going to move out on the 15th. Well, you're expecting the rent due on the 1st, so a full month would be till the end. If they move out early, the system is going to specify a prorated amount for the last month of the lease. All right, now you can specify a late payment. If they're late, you want to charge a $25 fee, and that can be a one-time fee or a daily fee. So if you specify that I want them to pay their rent within 3 days, okay, it's going to charge a late fee when they're past due. So the second of the actually no, that didn't update. So the 4th of the month. So they're 3 days late. They're late on the 4th. Any payments made on the 4th will be late. Now, if I want to specify daily, that means that every day after the 3rd that they do not pay their rent, they will get charged a late fee of $25 a day. Okay. There's no way currently to specify a flat fee and then a daily fee after that. Let's just leave it a one-time fee of $25 when the late is 3 days late. We're not going to talk about rent processing at this time, but this is where you would enable rent processing. We're going to skip over this and cover this in the rent processing video. Click Next to move on to the next screen. All right, now you have to add tenants to the lease. Okay. There's a couple different things to note here. When you click on Add Tenant, a drop-down box is available. You can always go into the Tenants menu and create your tenants up front, and then come in and select them for a lease. Here are all the different tenants that we have previously created for other leases, or that we've pre-created. All right, for this video, we're going to just go ahead and select New Tenant. I'm going to enter in an email address. And then a name. What their phone number is, and a cell phone, whatever information that you need. And I'm going to click Add Tenant. Now, I'm going to give myself a roommate. So I'm going to click Add Tenant again. Now I'm not going to specify an email this time, and I'm going to say that I'm living with Sally. I'm not going to enter any more information. Now the reason I showed you that is if you have a situation where you have multiple tenants, you can now decide, is there going to be one payment for the entire group, or is each tenant going to pay separately? If you specify each tenant pays separately, the system will automatically divide the rent. You can pre-allocate this however you want. Now something that's important to note as far as this is concerned, even though we're specifying two different payments here, the tenants are going to be late if any of them are late. Meaning if the $850 is not paid by the 3rd of the month, then there is a late fee. If you have an occasion where you want each of them to be separately responsible for their own portion, you need to create two leases. So you cannot have a single lease with different amounts, meaning Sally pays $500 and Alex pays $300 or $350, and then if Sally's late, Alex doesn't get charged a late fee. That has to be done on separate leases. All right, so let's go ahead and click Next. The next step is going to be the system's going to automatically send an invite to the tenants that you've entered an email in. Now, what the invite is it's an invitation to connect to you via Smart Property Systems. Right? They will get their own account, their own login. It's how they can go in and track their rent, send maintenance requests, and so forth. The tenant login will be covered in another video. This can also be sent after the fact. So let's say I'm setting this up front and I don't want to send that invitation now. I'm going to uncheck. Now I can't send an invitation to Sally because we never entered an email. You can add an email here, or you can go in and edit the tenant after the fact and add an email then. So let's go ahead and click Next. If I have rent processing enabled, I can actually create deposits and fees for this tenant. We're going to skip over this for now, and we'll come back to it on a later video when we cover actually adding recurring deposits or security deposits and so forth. The final step is the review. This is where we go over and make sure everything's right. We've got 2 tenants, how much the rent is, how many deposits and so forth that we have created, what the late fee is, and so forth. If everything is fine, we can click Activate Lease. We can also leave it as pending. And let me show you that. If I leave it as pending, then we're going to come over to My Leases, and under Pending Leases, we now have the Forest Glen lease that we just created. When I'm ready, I can click Activate, and that lease is now an active lease, expecting the tenant to move in on the 15th of the month. So that's it. That's it for creating your first lease within a property. In future videos, we'll talk about extending a lease or modifying a lease after you've already created it and activated it.